Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh-Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News, broadcasting live from the Al Arabiya studios. These are our top stories. A Swiss ski resort fire leaves dozens dead and around 100 injured during a New Year's Eve celebration. Trump pulls National Guard troops from major US cities after the Supreme Court blocks his policing authority. And Zohran Mamdani makes history as New York City's first Muslim and South Asian mayor. Now, dozens are believed dead and around 100 injured after a fire tore through a bar in the Swiss ski resort of Crans, Montana, during New Year's Eve celebrations. The blaze broke out early this morning, trapping partygoers as flames engulfed the wooden venue. Authorities say the cause of the fire is still under investigation. For more on this, I'm joined from Brussels by our correspondent, William Denselow. William, several dozens people are presumed dead after a fire at a Swiss ski resort. Police have been giving an update. What more do we know about the situation?
Absolutely. Well, when it comes to the cause of the fire, as you rightly mentioned, is still very much under investigation, but the authorities have ruled out any serious foul play. In other words, they've ruled out finding any kind of explosives or that this could have been terrorist related. It's been reported by some, including the Associated Press, citing eyewitnesses, that perhaps the fire could have been started by a candle in a bottle, igniting the wooden ceiling in the lower layers of the Constellation bar, causing it to engulf in flames. But of course, this is just eyewitness accounts and early testimony, as the investigation is still very much in its early stages. When it comes to the loss of life, well, as you mentioned, several dozen believed to have died. Italian authorities warning that figure could be around the 40 mark, with around 100 people injured. When it comes to who the victims could be, well, authorities say that it's likely from several nationalities, but authorities warn that it could be several days before we know more about who exactly the victims were.
And William, as you say, extremely tragic circumstances surrounding what happened at that Swiss ski resort. But when and where did the fire initially break out?
We believe that it started around 1:30 in the morning local time in Crans, Montana, in the Constellation bar. Now, this is an incredibly busy and well-known institution in the area. It's been in business for a number of years and is incredibly popular, especially to watch sporting events. It has a number of big screens, so really popular destination. And of course, this is such a busy time for the town. It's a hugely popular time of year for tourists from across Europe and across the world to visit these kinds of ski resorts between Christmas and the New Year. When it comes to the location, well, it's understood that the lower parts of this bar, used as a nightclub for New Year's, is where the blaze could have started. But of course, this is just preliminary investigation and very much we're in the early stages of it, and we'll know more in the coming days. But the important notes is that efforts are continuing to try and provide help for those that have been injured. We understand that the local ICUs, the intensive care units, are at capacity in the local area. The likes of Italy and other neighbouring countries have opened up their doors, saying that if extra help is required, then their hospitals in the surrounding areas are willing to help with the amount of those injured.
And Swiss police have released video taken after the fire as more details do come to light about the tragedy that occurred. Right now, what is in place to take care of those seriously injured and the families who have lost loved ones?
Absolutely, and of course important to remember that this is such a huge time of grief and mourning. We've heard from the country's president saying that what should have been a day of celebrations marking New Year instead has become a day of mourning. There are plenty of outreach efforts from local authorities and a huge first response effort as well. We understand that some 10 helicopters, 40 ambulances, 150 responders were deployed to help put out the blazes in the early hours and to try and get those to safety. I mentioned the outreach from neighbouring nations to help with the huge influx of those with incredibly serious burn injuries going forward. But it could be a number of days still before we know exactly more about those that have been impacted. We've heard, for example, from the UK saying they haven't heard from directly from Swiss authorities, but say they're standing by ready to help any British nationals that could have been impacted by this blaze. So very much a wait-and-see period for many nations, waiting to see whether their citizens have been impacted. But of course, as far as Swiss authorities are concerned, well, it's certainly full speed ahead when it comes to this operation to provide the care for those that need it in this desperate time.
And you just touched on it there, William, but we have heard from the French President Emmanuel Macron and also other leaders around the world. They've obviously, said that they're extremely hurt and sorry by this, giving the Swiss government their condolences. But what else have they had to say on the situation that occurred?
Absolutely. We've heard from French President Emmanuel Macron, as you rightly mentioned. He says and spoke of a deep emotion. He said that France extends its full solidarity and fraternal support to Switzerland at this time. We've also heard just a few moments ago from Volodymyr Zelensky, Ukraine's president, saying that all should be done to help prevent tragedies like this happening again. He expressed his deep condolences as well to the Swiss people and all those impacted during this time. So, as you might imagine, at a time that should be a day of celebration, a huge outpouring of support and condolences for those impacted in Crans, Montana. And of course, important to note, this is not just a famous and popular tourist destination. It's also very much central on the map for professional athletes as well. In just a few weeks' time, Crans, Montana is expected to host one of the major events for downhill skiing ahead of the Winter Olympics for both men and women's events. And just in February 2027, it itself is expected to host the World Championship. So this is an incredibly known destination. So the impact of this fire will be felt both by the Professional Winter Olympics Association, of course, so many tourists and revelers that have visited this site, and of course, not to mention the local population too.
William Denselow, thank you so much for joining us and bringing us the latest on that tragic fire at the Swiss ski resort. Now, Bangladesh is mourning the death of its first female Prime Minister, Khaleda Zia, a towering political figure whose career shaped the country for decades. Her legacy, as well as her long-running rivalry with Sheikh Hasina and the impact of her passing on Bangladesh's political landscape, are now coming into focus, particularly with the national elections just weeks away. For more on this, I'm joined by Arabiya English journalist Darshan Dalal. Darshan, thank you so much for joining us. How will Khaleda Zia's legacy be viewed within Bangladesh and internationally?
Hi, Leigh-Ann. Thanks for having me. As you said, she was the first a female prime minister of Bangladesh, and she was the second leader of a Muslim majority democracy, first being Benazir Bhutto of Pakistan, who was elected as prime minister in 1988. Khaleda Zia became prime minister in 1991. Her passing has essentially united a deeply divided country. Thousands have come out for her funeral and prayers as well. And following her passing, the interim leader, Muhammad Yunus, said in a statement that she will be seen as a strong symbol of democratic movement in the country, and that she will be remembered for her strength and resilience. So she was essentially seen as a shy housewife to Zohran, who was president of the country. And after following his assassination in 1981, she took the reins from him and became the leader of Bangladeshi National Party, BNP. And since then, she has served as the leader of Bangladesh for 3 times. So from a shy housewife to the leader of the country for 3 times, that is how her legacy will be seen.
And as a leader, what were her most significant achievements in government, Darshan? And where do critics say her leadership actually fell short?
So when she became prime minister in 1991, she essentially came on the promise of liberating Bangladesh from poverty and liberating the country from economic backwardness. She also made primary education free and compulsory for people. And she also lifted restrictions on foreign investment, which led to the boom and the Bangladeshi garment industry. However, she was also accused of corruption in her second term. In 1996, as she was contesting for the election, which she announced early. She won about 278 seats out of 300 in an election which was boycotted by all the opposition parties, including Sheikh Hasina's Awami League. That premiership lasted only for 12 days. And following the election later on, she once again came back to power in 2001. She was accused of corruption, and she was also accused of allowing the militancy surge in the country. She was more of an assertive leader, and the fact that she was uncompromising, which also meant that she was isolated domestically as well as internationally. So that is how one of her criticism was, that she was uncompromising. I mean, she was seen as a democracy icon, but she never colluded with any of the military leader, unlike Sheikh Hasina.
And let's talk about that right now, because the political rivalry between Khaleda Zia and Sheikh Hasina has really defined Bangladeshi politics for decades. How did this era change politics in the country, and what does it leave behind?
Interesting. I mean, in the 1990, both Sheikh Hasina and Khaleda Zia came together to oust a military dictator, Hussein Mohammad Ershad. And surprisingly, in 1991, she became the prime minister. And that was the only partnership that they ever had. Since then, they had a bitter rivalry, which was deep, long, extremely divided and political. As I said before, Khaleda Zia was seen as polite, who chose her words carefully, but was bold and assertive. On the other hand, Sheikh Hasina, who was seen as more outspoken and bold, once also colluded with a military leader to basically gain power. But that basically defined the relationship and the decades in which they alternated power. And it was called the Battle of the Begums, which is an honorary title in the Urdu language given for women of high stature and power in South Asia. But it's interesting to note that despite this decades-long bitter rivalry, Sheikh Hasina, who lives in exile in India after her ouster last year, has come out and said in a condolence message for Zia, and right after her passing, that Bangladesh will remember her as the first female leader, and that Bangladesh has lost a leadership position, and Bangladesh National Party will essentially be remembering her. And she has also sent some condolence messages, which should not be overlooked because their rivalry was quite deep. And given that she has put out a statement right after that, it is quite interesting.
And let's talk a little bit about, with Khaleda Zia's passing, it comes just ahead of the general election in Bangladesh, which is going to take place in February. Now, how might her absence influence voter sentiment and party dynamics, particularly for the BNP?
So since her passing, as I said before, the country is essentially united. Thousands have come out for her funeral. This will give momentum to Bangladesh National Party. And her legacy will live on in the form of her son, Tariq Rahman, who came back just days ago on 25th of December after 17 years in self-imposed exile in London. He was accused of several one of the 2004 grenade bombings in 2004 a rally where Sheikh Hasina was present, in which dozens of people were killed. But now he is seen as heir apparent to Khaleda Zia, and even his face is coming alongside Khaleda Zia's in banners and posters across the country. So it is essentially being seen that he is going to be the next prime minister when he secures majority in the February elections. And that is an interesting scenario in the country, in a sense that given the Awami League holds so much significance even on the streets at the moment, it remains to be seen. However, he is indeed seen as a future prime minister as long as he secures the majority in the Feb elections.
Darshan, Dalal, it was brilliant to have you on. Thank you so much for your analysis and time.
Thank you, Leigh-Ann.
US President Donald Trump is withdrawing National Guard troops from cities including Chicago and Los Angeles after a Supreme Court ruling limited his authority to use troops for policing. Trump says troops may return in a different and much stronger form if crime does rise. Governors and city leaders welcomed the withdrawal as a victory for state control and also democracy. For more on this, I'm joined by Erol Morkoc, a spokesman for Republicans Overseas. Erol, brilliant to have you on the show, and Happy New Year to you. I just want to begin with, so Donald Trump has removed National Guard troops from 3 Democratic cities following that Supreme Court ruling I just spoke about. Does this decision undermine the president's authority?
It doesn't undermine his authority, but it does prove that we have a system of checks and balances, and President Trump is restricted in that ethos. Now, what he's done, I think, is very clever. He's proven through the data that just came out this week that the U.S. has had a record drop in homicides since we started taking the record, nearly 20% drop in homicides. 1 in 5 people who were supposed to die this year didn't die. Now, you can't attribute all of that to the National Guard presence in these high crime areas, whether it be Memphis or DC, but certainly you can attribute some of it. Also, the attention that he paid towards this has been a huge reduction in overdoses, huge reductions in burglaries, violent crimes, all of these. The murder one just being so front and center because it's a loss of life. So I think President Trump has proved his point. And now he's also said, as you pull these National Guard troops out, if we start to see the crime levels go back up, we're going to bring them right back in. So I think it shows that he's the domestic policy of the United States is not the same as international policy. He can't just do anything he wants without a clear and present insurrection. Gang activity probably doesn't cross the line when it's domestic gang activity. So focusing on the Tren de Aragua or the foreign national cartels was their method. But I think right now it's an easy way to step back, see if the cities can step into that role. The citizens there want that, by the way. People are happy with the results. So this is a gift to these Democrat cities to now just take the mantle and maintain the peace. If they can't do it, I think Trump will be back with the National Guard again.
And Trump actually praised the achievements, Errol, of the troops in bringing down crime in Democratic-run cities, like you just said to me, but claims their work was hindered by local opposition. Why was there so much resistance to the National Guard deployments? I think that's a big question, because you're just explaining to me how much difference it made, but he did face a lot of criticism.
So it's sort of a weird thing to try to explain to an international audience, but the police forces inside of major metropolitan cities are not exactly focused on reduction of crime. They're focused on perpetuating the sort of situation they have. So solving the problem doesn't seem to be something that was in their purview or interest. Rather, they're much more concerned on being reelected or reappointed. Sheriffs in America are elected, and the police chiefs and whatnot oftentimes are appointed by the mayor or whatnot, as we see Mamdani in New York restructuring everything. Just like when the president comes in, he can do certain things. So in a lot of times, the crime is what keeps their communities down and what keeps their communities voting for them. And so as counterintuitive as it sounds, the Democrat Party in great part doesn't have a lot of interest in reduction of crime. Rather, it has an interest in perpetuation of crime so it can keep its programs going. And the more downtrodden and unhappy those communities are, the more disaffected they will be and the more likely they will be to vote for people who promise them a better future. When somebody shows up and actually just starts delivering that better future, starts delivering 1 in 5 homicides being taken away, 20% reduction in burglaries, and all of these things, it's egg on their face, because these are the people who should have been protecting their citizenry for the last decade. And when President Trump can snap his fingers, send a few hundred agents in town, and all of a sudden that's that much reduction, it shows what could have been, and it shows the grift that they have been doing. So their pushback isn't because they see a problem with solving crime. It's if they solve crime, it eliminates their value that they've presented to their citizenry, which has been the crime is unstoppable, and without me, it's going to get worse. Well, clearly that's not true. So let's see how they respond to the new data.
And I think that's such an interesting point to make, because President Trump says it's hard to believe that these Democrat mayors and governors, all of whom are greatly incompetent, would want us to leave. So what do you make of this divisive rhetoric? And do you think that actually what you explained to me, the Democratic mayors and governors who need to be re-elected are actually going to step up their game?
I think it's they're going to have to step up their game, because they're in a really bad spot, because in the end, we say in America's scoreboard, look at the scoreboard. In the end, you might have disagreed with us. You might have said that we're bad people, we're heartless people, whatever, but we're concerned about the American citizens first. And the American citizens are seeing that data and they're saying, wow, that looks pretty good. Now, as we go into the midterms in 2026, there is a certain sort of gamesmanship. The rhetoric there is going to be a little bit more bombastic as people like Pritzker or Gavin Newsom try to stand up to Trump, or Tim Walz, who's caught in just the biggest fraud scheme ever, completely dead to rights in most cases, it seems like, at least from a broad spectrum, allegedly. Just this sort of bad behavior that's coming out. I think that their best option is, and you see it a little bit with Muriel Bowser in D.C. actually coming out and praising the National Guard, who, by the way, are our brothers and sisters in our country. The National Guard isn't some random paramilitary force from abroad that's brought here. The National Guard comes during times of national disaster, at times of strife. So, welcoming them and seeing how good they've done, this is a chance for the Democrats actually to seize on it and then start making their cities better and saying, look, we don't need Trump. And they can probably spin that and say that they're the reason for it. So if they were wise, and if they saw, like, if they thought about winning domestic votes, they would do that. But likely they're going to try to stand up to Trump. They're going to say no more kings, and they're going to try to obfuscate the brave men of ICE who are there deporting criminals. And in doing so, it'll probably ramp up the rhetoric, and it will cause them some hurt in the midterms, where they have obviously the statistical advantage going in as the non-incumbent party.
Yeah, it's really interesting, because it feels like the midterms are coming quicker than I expected, Errol. But just quickly, before I do let you go, it's really that Trump faced many lawsuits against his decision to deploy the National Guard. Do you think that this kind of hectic, disruptive politics from the US president is going to carry on this year? As you did mention, the midterms are in focus, and I wonder if he's going to try to slightly shift.
Yes, I think you're going to see, I actually think a little bit of a pullback from the Republicans in general, because they went so aggressively on foreign policy. Right now, they need to change everything to a domestic audience. And the domestic audience needs to be given a much more positive and much more direct type of attention. So I think you're going to see a complete change in the messaging out of the White House into that midterm. But the second the midterms are over, I expect it to go full bore, because then you'll have Donald Trump unencumbered for 2 more years of his presidency. He has nothing to lose and everything to give, and he's going to give that to the American people. So we might see a little bit of a slowdown and change in the midterms as we focus domestically. But as we get out of that, I think it's going to be all gas, no brakes until the end of the Trump saga is finally over in 2028.
I feel like it's been all gas for the last year. Erol Morkoc,
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Zohran Mamdani has been sworn in as New York City's mayor, taking office just after midnight, following a stunning primary victory focused on affordability. At just 34 years old, the Democratic Socialist makes history as the city's first Muslim and South Asian mayor, and is the youngest in more than a century. Mamdani says tackling the cost of living will be the core of his agenda as he does take charge of America's most expensive city. For more on this, I'm joined from Washington, D.C. by our correspondent, Jagriti Duvi. Jagriti, thank you so much for joining us. So tell us about this ceremony. It was held in a unique location for Zohran Mamdani.
Yes, indeed. This private swearing-in ceremony was held in a disused subway station under City Hall. And like everything that Mamdani has done, the optics are much more than just optics. It's very symbolic and very deliberate. And Mamdani said that this choice of this subway station is a testament to the hard work of New Yorkers, the industry of the city, and the people who make it run. And this was a very small private ceremony attended by about 20 people, including Zohran Mamdani's mother, the filmmaker Mira Nair, his father, an academic, his wife, the illustrator, the Syrian-American illustrator Ramaduaji, and her family were there. And Letitia James, the New York's Attorney General, swore Mamdani in, and he said that this was the honor and privilege of a lifetime. And it was really a short and sweet ceremony. They disappeared through a hatch back into City Hall afterwards. And it really encapsulated this moment. It happened at midnight, just after midnight on New Year's Day. And it really is the dawning of a new era for New York, a real marked change for the city. As you say, one of the most expensive cities in the world, led now by a mayor who campaigned on affordability.
And as you just mentioned to me, Jagriti, that was a private ceremony. But can you tell us about the public one that is actually happening later on today?
Yeah, so 1 p.m. Eastern Time is going to be the public swearing-in ceremony on the steps of City Hall. Zohran Mamdani is likely to make a longer speech at this one, where he'll talk directly to New Yorkers, it's expected, according to reports, potentially repeating some of those messages that we heard him expound on the campaign trail, messages of hope, as I say, messages of, a new era for New York, a new moment in time, where New Yorkers can expect the policies that he wanted. Now he's going to say he's going to try and put them into practice. So the campaigning on affordability, on fast and free buses, on universal childcare, and a message of hope, as I say, he's expected to deliver. The swearing in at this ceremony is expected to be done by Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont, another friend on the left, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the Congresswoman of New York. She is going to be giving a keynote address there. And this is meant to be a moment of celebration. So the transition team On their website, they're giving information about a block party that is expected to be starting around 11 o'clock. That's when they say people should turn up between 11 and 12 so they can experience music and the celebratory atmosphere before the swearing in at 1 p.m. Eastern Time.
But let's be honest, you've just told me that Mamdani campaigned on the promise of affordability. But the big question is, do we know what he will do now that he's in office? And what are some of the challenges that Mamdani is going to face to actually push his agenda through? Because you can say a lot of stuff, but it's very difficult to do a lot of stuff, Jagriti.
Yes, indeed. And, Mamdani has alluded to this. He said that he campaigned in poetry, but he's going to run in prose. So the idea is that he talked big ideas, but now it's when he starts to govern, it's going to be on the practicality of prose. And this is really the challenge that he faces: how to put his promises into practice. The cost of some of his very ambitious agenda, is free universal childcare, fast and free buses, reduced cost of housing, rent freeze, all of this is going to have a price tag of around $7 billion according to some reports. Where is that money going to come from? He's going to have to deal with a more moderate governor of New York, Kathy Hochul. She's not on the same political wing as he is, an avowed democratic socialist. So on the left, how does he talk to people on the center and even on the right? And, there might be federal budget cuts coming in. There might be, Kathy Hochul might be talking about tightening the purse strings for the state. So how is he going to get that approximately $7 billion to push his agenda through? And, his lack of executive experience is something that his opponents talked a lot about on the campaign trail. And that is something that is going to be tested when he comes into office as well. And he's going to have to deal with a very mercurial president, Republican President Donald Trump. In that meeting, their first meeting in the Oval Office, it was actually a very jovial meeting. People were expecting sort of verbal fireworks to continue. They both said some things about each other. But in that meeting, Donald Trump was very complimentary, saying that, Republicans are going to be surprised by this guy. They both want, for their own different reasons, for New York to be successful because, Donald Trump has a long history and a connection with New York. So he obviously wants to be careful. He doesn't want to bash the new mayor too hard and make things too difficult for him, where any failures in New York can be then attributed and blamed on him. So there's lots of different things at play here, lots of challenges that Mamdani is going to have to face. But really, the big one is, where is that money going to come from to put his promises into practice?
Yeah, absolutely. Jagriti Dubey, thank you so much for joining me. Let's take a look at some of the other stories making the headlines today. The Israeli military says it has killed a Palestinian man in the occupied West Bank. Troops reportedly opened fire on people throwing stones, describing the incident as an ambush and calling those involved militants. Palestinian authorities confirmed that a 26-year-old man was killed. Russia has accused Ukraine of killing at least 24 people, including a child, in a drone strike on a hotel and cafe during New Year's celebrations in the Russian-controlled Kherson region. Russian officials called the attack a war crime, saying civilians were deliberately targeted. Finnish authorities have detained a vessel sailing from Russia suspected of damaging an undersea cable linking Helsinki and Estonia across the Gulf of Finland. The ship, flagged under St. Vincent and Grenadines, was en route from St. Petersburg to Israel. All 14 crew members have now been arrested. And a Walt Disney World worker in Florida is recovering after getting in the way of a runaway prop boulder heading towards the audience. The 180-kilogram rubber prop was part of an Indiana Jones scene recreation. Countries around the Asia-Pacific range in the new year with fireworks, light shows and dancing. But in Hong Kong, celebrations were more subdued this year following November's deadly apartment complex fire. Chris Gilbert has this report.
The Great Wall of China with a glowing send-off for 2025. The famous Zhuangguan section of the Chinese landmark was illuminated with an immersive light show and countdown to welcome the new year. Throughout Asia, there were fireworks and festivities. Eco-friendly fireworks lit up the Bangkok sky alongside the Chao Phraya River over department store icon Siam. The show spanned nearly 1.5 kilometers and included a 4D aerial performance of drones and pyrotechnics under the theme In Eternity Reverence, to honor the late Queen Mother. Hong Kong is known for its skyscraper light shows and played to its strengths for the New Year party, swapping pyrotechnics for projections. The government called off its annual fireworks display over Victoria Harbour following November's deadly apartment complex fire in Tai Po. It introduced this alternative event called New Hopes, New Beginnings, aimed at spreading, quote, positive energy. Taiwan went the other direction with the fireworks extravaganza lighting up Taipei 101, Taiwan's tallest skyscraper for the 22nd year straight. It was a more traditional and solemn celebration in Seoul. More than 10,000 South Koreans brought in the new year with a traditional bell-tolling ceremony. The bronze bell was struck 33 times by invited guests. Across the DMZ, North Korea also held a fireworks festival and dancing in Kim Il-sung Square. These images, released by state media, show students and residents dancing in the center of Pyongyang. Leader Kim Jong-un reportedly attended the celebrations and lauded the North Korean people's efforts in 2025. Down under, fireworks were shot from New Zealand's largest building, the Sky Tower. While in Sydney, there was a minute's silence for the victims of the deadly Bondi shooting. And on New Year's Day, millions of Japanese flocked to Shinto shrines to take part in Hatsumode, the traditional first shrine visit of the year, to pray for peace and happiness in 2026. Chris Gilbert, Al Arabiya English.
Let's take a look at the top business news now. Bulgaria has officially adopted the euro 20 years after joining the European Union. Young Bulgarians are optimistic about the move, which also saw the poorest EU nation join the NATO military alliance and the Schengen visa scheme. But older, more conservative citizens have resented the change from the existing lev currency. Trump Media has launched a new cryptocurrency for the company's shareholders. Investors will receive one digital token for each share they do own. Trump, the company's largest shareholder, has also called for looser regulations in the crypto industry. And turning to all the sports news now. Star boxer Anthony Joshua has been released from the hospital following a car crash that did kill two of his friends. After leaving the hospital, the former world champion visited the funeral home where their bodies are being prepared for repatriation. The 36-year-old was a passenger in a Lexus SUV that collided with a truck on a major highway near Lagos on Monday. And the Real Madrid football legend Roberto Carlos is recovering after a medical procedure. The Brazilian former left-back denied rumours that he had suffered from a heart attack. A reminder of our top stories. A Swiss ski resort fire leaves dozens dead and around 100 injured during New Year's Eve celebrations. Trump pulls National Guard troops from major US cities after the Supreme Court blocks his policing authority. And Zohran Mamdani makes history as New York City's first Muslim and South Asian mayor. And that's all from us on W News. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Of course, follow us on X, and we'll be back in a couple of hours' time with a W News Extra. Goodbye. Thank you for watching, and happy 2026.